Mid lane is widely regarded as the most mechanical role, and as a result, you will typically see players with very good mechanics or players that are just obsessed with mechanical outplays that reside in the mid lane. However, since these players are always so focused on their mechanics, oftentimes their macro play is going to be lacking, which is a real shame because mid lane has some of the most unique macro in the entire game. Today, we're going to be going in depth on some very basic mid lane macro that you can instantly apply to your games and see instant results. By completely understanding the topics that we're going to be covering today, you're going to be able to put yourself into a carrying position in many more games. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles, including a mid lane essentials guide, as well as champion specific courses. So if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. Now, without further ado, let's get into some of this mid lane macro. Now, mid lane macro, unlike top lane, ADC, or jungle macro, completely revolves around roaming, and that is it. As a result, basic mid lane macro revolves around establishing good roam timers for yourself and denying any good roam timers for the enemy. Now, we've covered it before on the channel, but a roam timer refers to any time that you have to roam into the enemy jungle or side lane without losing any resources for yourself. Typically, only one mid laner can have a roam timer at a time. Now, you might be thinking, well, this is good and all, but how do I create a roam timer? This is very simple. A roam timer is created when you crash your minions into the enemy tower. The more minions that crash into the enemy tower, the longer the roam timer will be. Now, this does not mean that you want to shove every single wave into the enemy tower. Remember, in order to maintain the most pressure possible in your own lane, you only want to be shoving certain waves into the enemy tower and then freezing the remaining waves. Ideally, you only want to be creating a roam timer when there's something to achieve with that roam timer. If there's nothing to do, you don't have any wards to place in the enemy jungle, the side lanes aren't gankable, then creating a roam timer isn't going to do anything for you, and it's just going to give the enemy mid laner an opportunity to CS for free under their own tower. So how do we determine whether or not we should even be looking to roam? The first and most important thing that you should always be looking for is how many wards do you have in your inventory. If you're sitting on 2 wards, then you want to be creating a roam timer so that you can place one of your wards in the enemy jungle or in the river. But what if you only have 1 ward? Then what should you be looking at? In this case, you just want to take a few seconds to look at what is going on bot lane and top lane. If the enemy bot is shoving towards your tower, or the enemy top is shoving towards your tower, then you can look to create a roam timer, go to those lanes, and secure a kill. Now, if you only have 1 ward and both side lanes are ungankable, then the last thing that you need to consider is whether or not the enemy jungler is killable in their jungle, or if you can counter gank the enemy jungler. If you don't have any idea where the enemy jungler is, then it's best to just leave the lane in a frozen state and deny as much CS as possible from the enemy mid laner, poking whenever you can. Now, this is going to be a little bit different for each and every champion. For example, champions like Kassadin and Vladimir are not going to see very many opportunities to perform a gank for the side lane because they're not going to be all too useful early on into the game, whereas Talon is going to be seeing a lot of opportunity. Once you have developed this discipline and you know exactly when you should and shouldn't be creating roam timers, you'll be able to stop playing ping pong with the enemy mid laner, just shoving waves back and forth, and you'll actually be able to have some sort of wave control, creating a CS advantage in the lane. Now, just because we know when to create a roam timer doesn't mean we're going to be creating the best roam timer possible. So, what information do we need in order to create the best roam timer we can? First, you need to identify which wave you are on. Now, if we were to cover this in depth, it would be the most complex topic that we could talk about for mid lane macro, so instead, I'm just going to give you a few guidelines. The first rule is that standard waves are very easy to fast push, and as a result are going to be very easy to catch. The second rule is that cannon waves are very hard to slow push, and as a result, very hard to catch. This is why it is so important to identify which wave you are on before you determine what you want to do with the wave. If you're just mindlessly hard shoving wave after wave, and you try to hard shove a cannon wave into the enemy tower before roaming, the roam timer that you get from that is going to be teeny. On the other hand, if you're only hard shoving a single standard wave, then you will get a larger roam timer, but the enemy mid laner will also be able to roam with you because they can clear the wave just as quickly as you did. So which one of these are better? Well, it's a bit of a trick question because neither one of these are optimal. We're going to be combining the strengths from both of them and completely eliminating any weaknesses that this strategy is going to have. We're going to be utilizing the fact that cannon waves are very easy to form into slow pushes. Combine that with a standard wave, create a massive wave, crash it into the enemy tower, and get as large of a roam timer as possible without allowing the enemy laner to follow us. In order to do this, all you have to do is slowly start autoing the melee and cannon creeps in the wave so that your wave starts to slow push. You don't want to use your abilities or auto attacks on the ranged creeps because this will fast push the wave, meaning it's not going to be in a good spot for you to crash it into the tower. As soon as the next wave after the cannon wave arrives, you want to fast push that as quickly as possible, crash it into the enemy tower, and give yourself as big of a roam timer as possible. While this does sound like it might be a little bit complicated, it honestly isn't, and it's something that you can get down just by practicing it in Practice Tool a few times. This is the exact strat that challenger mid laners use in order to keep CS advantage while still roaming. If you're using this strategy properly, in the first 10 minutes of the game, you can build a 20 to 30 CS lead while still being able to roam at every opportunity. If the enemy mid laner opts to follow you, they'll be losing even more CS and they'll be at an EXP disadvantage. This is what you need to be doing in order to establish complete and utter lane dominance. Now, something we do need to address is the fact that you can't always have wave control. You're going to have to base, sometimes it's going to be a bad matchup for you, or you're going to get ganked by the enemy jungler, meaning you're going to give up wave control for short periods of time in each and every game. So in the instances in which the enemy has a roam timer and you can't follow it, there's one very simple ward that you can use in order to shut down any chance that they have at a kill. This basic ward is a ward placed in the lane just outside of their tower's range. Now, if you watch challenger mid laners, you probably see this ward all the time, and you might think it's a misclick, or you might have no idea what this ward is. Remember, we mentioned earlier on in the video that you're not constantly going to be setting up roam timers, and that you're going to be looking to freeze and deny CS while poking as much as possible. The first purpose that this ward serves is it allows you to keep the wave close to your own tower while maintaining vision of the enemy laner. It doesn't matter where the enemy laner goes, they can hide behind walls, they can be under their tower, this ward will see that and you'll know exactly when the enemy laner is in the lane and is not in the lane. Now you might be wondering, well, why is it even important to know whether or not the enemy laner is in the lane or not? How does that affect me? One common thing that a lot of laners will do is they'll hide behind one of the walls and pretend to be roaming so that you shove the wave into their tower, meaning they can start CSing again. By placing this ward, they're not able to do that because you'll just see them behind the wall, you can keep the freeze, and they're not going to be exerting any pressure on the map. This is not the only purpose that this ward serves though. In the cases where you have to base or you don't have wave control and the enemy laner is shoving the wave into your tower, this ward will spot out wherever they go. It is not possible to roam over this ward without knowing which side of the map they went to. If they decide to base, then you'll see them basing, allowing you to do whatever it is you want to do with the wave. Or if they're roaming to either side lane, then you can ping your allied side laner and let them know that a gank is coming and that they need to be safe. However, this is only one ward, and you're going to be able to constantly be getting this one while still having additional wards, plus a pink ward that you can get every base. So what should you be doing with your other wards? Your second standard ward should always be reserved for the enemy jungle. Now this is pretty heavily debated, but personally I think that the Raptor ward is the best ward that you can get in the enemy jungle. As far as your pink ward, it should always go into the South River's pixel brush close to the dragon. Once you are out of the lane phase, you can move your pink into a better location based on the objective that you're fighting for, but during the lane phase, it always wants to be in that exact brush. Now let's quickly recap. The 3 things that you want to be most focused on for mid lane macro are determining when you should be initiating a slow push and when you should be freezing, how to initiate the best slow push possible for the biggest roam timers, and what you should be doing with your wards and why. These 3 things apply to every single mid lane champion in the entire game, simply because every single mid lane champion has to play the laning phase. If you're able to start implementing these things into your own play, you will quickly realize that the game is completely different from how you were playing before. You will have a completely new tool in your arsenal in macro play, and you won't have to rely on mechanics to carry you through everything. Remember, a good mid laner isn't just about mechanics, and it's not just about macro. You need to have a good balance of both. If you enjoyed this guide for mid lane macro and you want to see something similar to it, maybe in a different lane, then let us know in a comment down below. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles, including a mid lane's essential course, as well as champion-specific courses. So if that is something that interests you, make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. As always, I'm Panther. I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.